All right, the lady says it's recording. Here we are on The Blind Man in Black. I'm Brian Snyder. Thank you for watching on YouTube and listening on Apple Podcast. If you like the show, please rate, subscribe, and review. And if you don't like it, please rate, subscribe, and review. And if you like my wife and I being exhausting, please go to the Exhausting Snyders on TikTok. So I'm here with my wife and co-host, Rachel Snyder. She is the co-founder of Odd Salon San Francisco. She was the former editor-in-chief of Atlas Obscura, and she's a death positive advocate, former funeral counselor, and she is currently writing a screenplay about her father's band entitled Searching for Absalom. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Brian.
All right. And as always, here is our very, very special guest, Deprofessionalized Intellectual, author, activist, and our dear friend, Gustavo Esteva.
Hola, Brian. Good to see you all, you both.
Wonderful to have you here. So this is a continuing conversation. We started off on the art of dying. And like I said before, you know, in Buddhism, one of the first things they say to study is death. So, which is interesting because it made me think about that when we started this conversation. And then I was kind of like, how do we go from death to transforming rage into love? So we're going to talk about that. How do we transform rage into love? And to start the conversation, please begin, Gustavo.
Yes, thank you, Brian. First of all, I would like to establish a very clear distinction between the kind of rage that erupts in your personal interaction. In that kind of case, you have real love for your partner, for your family, for your father, your mother, your friends. But suddenly something happens and then you are really enraged with them. The rage erupts inside you. And then in that situation, you are not really transforming rage into love, but reclaiming love, recovering the love that you are losing because of your rage, and trying to process the rage in that specific context that includes a framework of love. I am talking also about something entirely different. You cannot use the word love in the same meaning if you talk about the love for humanity, love for the planet, love for Mother Earth. That is something like abstract things. And what we have today, more and more, all around the world, is an enormous rage for what things that are being done to you, to your family, to your friends, to the soil, to Mother Earth, by capital and elites, etc. And then this is producing a lot of rage and even very irrational reactions in processing, in expressing this kind of rage. And then we need to examine how that kind of rage is transformed in something that we can still call love, but it's a different kind of love to the love that you are having with your personal interaction. And then perhaps I would love to talk a little more about this second kind of transformation, of that transformation of rage into love, in the case that is political, social, cultural, and perhaps Rachel can speak more about the rage in the personal interaction.
Yes, I can. Sorry.
Did you zone out?
No, I was listening. I was processing. I didn't know it was my turn. You said that, I talk about my dad a little bit, which would, be personal rage personified really. And transforming into love. So I can think of a couple stories, but not really related to my dad. My dad's a hard one because so Gustavos, so you know a little bit more about my father. He was a very passionate, very intense man, and he was an artist and a musician. And he grew up a very violent home and a very difficult childhood. And he was the youngest of six boys mostly, but one girl. And he had a very big presence and a very big temper. And but he was a very gentle person inside. And he was very dedicated to animals and children and anyone small, who was being picked on. He bullied the bullies, if that makes sense. And he had this very strong dedication to not striking his children. That was a very big deal because he was abused so much as a kid that, but he really had to fight that, I think, because it was what he, it's what he understood. It's what he knew. So he didn't have anyone to teach him kindness or to teach him compassion or patience. And he just kind of knuckled through it. Like it was never easy. But he really fought that pattern to, to use violence as his means of communication. And he spent his whole life fighting this big rage inside of him that was it went from just what had happened to him to what happens to everyone. It went into political and social stuff too. Just anytime anyone was being treated unfairly or being treated poorly or with violence, it hurt him in a much more personal way, I think, than it did, the average person. So that's why Brian was saying he might be a good subject. As far as transforming it into love, I think he transformed it into love for me. But otherwise, he was angry always, at everything and everyone. But he was an amazing, caring, very loving father and grandfather. And he, like I said, he never struck me ever. Although I know that sometimes his instincts told him that was the only thing to do. And so I watched him battle that internally, constantly. And with people in the street, he was someone who, if he saw a man kick a dog on the street, he'd pull his car in the middle of the road and stop it and leave it running and go grab the man and give him a good shake. And, how about I do that to you? And he would never strike the person, but he was always standing up for everybody, anyone that he saw being treated poorly, he'd get in there. So I learned to be that way myself because I watching him, and I learned to fight, and I learned to always stick up for anyone, whether I knew them or not. And at some point in my 20s or so, I realized that was not better. That bullying a bully is still being a bully. It doesn't matter who it is. You don't get to have an excuse like it's okay for these people and not for these people. So I kind of had to teach that to myself. And right before he died, I was very, very angry at everything. I was going through a lot of things, including my cancer, and I was extremely angry at the world and at family. And he sat me down when he got his terminal cancer diagnosis. He sat me down and I was raging about everything. And he said, I think I made a mistake and I taught you the wrong way. I taught you to fight, and I taught you to not to trust and to go down swinging at all times, and to just never let never let them win, never let them take anything from you, and to use that anger to power you through life. And I think I taught you the wrong thing. So I hope that you figure it out before I do, before I did, And he became so gentle in that those last couple of years of his life. And he really tried to, even people that he and I had raged at together, he tried to show me how to forgive, and he found a way to forgive or even just to understand, where they were coming from. So I think he came full circle. Whatever he was taught as a child, he overcame, and then he even overcame his own direction that he took himself on. And I did listen to that, and I did take it to heart, and have applied it in my life recently, particularly in a story that has to do with death, which I will, I'll let you answer first, and then I'll tell that story, because it was a moment where I could have gone the way of my father's old way or the new way that felt a lot better, really. Although it felt really good to be angry. It feels very powerful, but it doesn't feel great later when it burns out,
Yeah, I think about, my friend Paul Chappelle. I talk about, I would talk to him about when I would get upset, and, and about trying to transform that. And he says, it happens, you get upset. And the problem with getting upset and angry at others is you have to repair the damage. And that if you can avoid that, that's better than, if there's a way to transform that. So you don't have to clean up the mess afterwards.
Well, and I feel like when there's death around or someone dies, I think that's a perfect opportunity to do that. I think it's a perfect opportunity to clean up a bunch of messes like that may have been made throughout your life or throughout that person's life.
And speaking of death, we should acknowledge it because it just happened the day before yesterday. You lost your aunt.
I did.
And, I think some of this, was part of that process, of, going through that. I think you even talked about it with her, didn't you? A little bit.
Yeah. Because, she was my father's closest companion and very much like him. And they were, them against the world. And my father died very angry and raging. He raged to the last moments. To those very last moments, he was fighting. He always fought. And she didn't. And she normally would have. She was, very, like I said, very much like him, but she found some sort of peace. And we did talk about it. And it was nice. Once he was gone, we were both kind of able to have these conversations without worrying about him being here, hovering and disagreeing. We were able to talk about his faults a little bit more openly. And yeah, she, I wish she had done more. I tried to convince her to do some forgiving that she was not willing to do, but that's her path to decide. But she did more than I thought she would. She did. She found a lot more peace in the end than he did, for sure.
And she went peacefully.
She went peacefully, yeah. Well, he did not. But she was ready, and he was not.
And so. It was on his birthday.
Yes, she waited for his birthday because she never missed a birthday ever. And I told him to go get her. I said, come on, she's been waiting. Stop messing around. She's probably got a card, so hurry. Yeah, she was very anxious to greet him again. But my family's torn apart in a lot of ways, and a lot of them are gone now. So a lot of the opportunity for that forgiveness is gone. But I've embraced everyone in my, they weren't my fights anyway. So it was easy for me to reach out to my family members that they did not have anything to do with, and kind of try to mend at least the next generation, instead of keeping that anger going when it doesn't belong to me even. I could be angry for them, but it doesn't fix anything or make anything better.
Yeah, and I think about Bishop Desmond Tutu's book, The Art of Forgiveness, and how important it is. It's not, the act of forgiving is really not about the person that needs to be forgiven, but the person that forgives. It's releasing that anger and resentment and pain.
Well, I think I talked a little bit in the last one about this experience that I had with a very dear friend that passed away almost a year ago, where he, as a child, he had witnessed his sister's death. They were playing and running around, and she ran in front of a car and was hit by the car. And his mother blamed him for it. He was about 7 or 8 years old, and his mother felt that either he had pushed her or had chased her out in front of the car. Whatever she had thought, she decided that he had caused her death and blamed him for it. And obviously that was very traumatic for him, because he watched it happen, and then to have to carry the burden of the blame on top of it. And he eventually ended up in our town at about 16 or 17, because he couldn't live with his parents anymore because they were just being really terrible to him. And he ended up being an alcoholic, and he drank himself to death last year at age 47. And everyone who loved him was always, very quick to blame his mother for what had happened to him and what state he had lived his life in. And that's, I think, a valid blame. I mean, what she did to him was horrible. And when he died, his sister asked on his mother's behalf, if his mother could have some of his cremated remains. And I was one of the 3 women who were kind of put in decision-making places, and myself and the other woman who was his ex-wife, we both said, no, absolutely not, no way, no. She cannot have anything. She deserves nothing from him. And his current partner, who was the third woman, she said, hear me out. And she said, why do we need to carry it on? Why do we need to carry on this anger and this ugliness and this pain? Why do we, he's gone and it shouldn't matter. And it might give her some peace because she probably needs it too. And she talked us into it. But my initial reaction was absolutely not. She gets nothing. She doesn't deserve anything, any part of him. And then, this woman, this lovely woman that is a very close friend of mine as well, and that I appreciate so much for this kind of thing, for teaching me these kinds of things. She really pointed out that there was no reason for that from us. It wasn't our fight and it wasn't our pain. And so we acquiesced and we did that. And I think we healed a very large wound in that family that had been there for years and years, or at least tried to, and it made a big difference in how we felt about the situation too. It didn't feel good to be angry and tell this woman who lost 2 children at this point, regardless of her part in it, that she couldn't have something of him when she didn't get to have him his whole life anyway. So it just felt better to kind of mend that as opposed to keeping his vendetta going for no reason, And I think that that's a very hard thing to do. I think it was hard for me to do. And I think people really struggle with it, especially when someone passes. They don't want anyone who treated them badly in life to get anything or have anything, when really they're not ours to give. First of all, it's not our things to give. And second of all, we don't know, how much pain the other person is in and what kind of solve it will be on the wounds of something that we don't, necessarily have anything to do with. And I saw it all the time in the funeral home, so many choices where people either chose to be kind and to forgive and put their hands out. Oh, sorry, there's deer pounding across the yard. or decided to be awful and to fight and to be mean and cold to each other. And that was always very painful to watch, very sad to watch. It usually was very painful for other people surrounding it that had nothing to do with the battle, just to be on the sidelines of it. So,
speaking of the mortuary, are you allowed to kind of share? There's something that came to mind, one story in particular that came to mind. And are you allowed to share without sharing names?
Yeah, as long as it's not too distinguishing. Yeah, which?
There was a story about a woman who had died. I think she killed herself.
Uh-huh.
And you witnessed her husband.
Oh, yes. Yeah, she had taken her life, and she had young children and a young husband. And he was alone with babies now. I mean babies, like one was an infant and the others were under 3. I think there's 3 of them altogether. And he had been the breadwinner. He was the one working. So he didn't know how to care for the children, and he didn't know how he was going to work. And he was very angry. And that was the only emotion I saw from him the entire time, was anger. And quiet anger. He didn't talk much during arrangements. He had other family members handle everything. But when they had their viewing, he screamed at her. He gave the children to someone else, and he went in and he just yelled at her, and let out all this anger that he had for her leaving him alone with the babies. And it was very sad, very jarring, to hear someone have that much rage at someone who had passed. And to be alone in a chapel with them, just raging at them. But I understood, of course he was angry. He was alone, and he had these children now that he had to care for himself, and he had obviously had no idea how to go about that. And he was angry about it for sure. But it was a loving anger though, there was no hatred in it. It was just a lot of disappointment and confusion and fear and betrayal, I'd say. I think he felt very betrayed, but it was difficult to watch.
So Gustavo, how do we transform rage into love?
Let me first say something, Brian. I do really hope that your audience learn as much as I did learn in the last 20 minutes. Because it was really a very impressive sharing by Rachel about something that I need to do now, another classification. We are living in unprecedented times. In 5,000 years of patriarchy, we have had all kinds of horrors. And we have terrible situations in the course of these 5,000 years in many countries, in many cultures, in many moments. But I think that what we are living today is an unprecedented kind of horror. And that we have been affected in the last 50 years, particularly the last 20 or 30 years, in a horrible way. And this implies everyone, even those that supposedly are getting all that kind of accumulation and goods and getting the benefits of this situation, even they are affected by this amazing horror that is producing in many people a level of moral degradation that are almost inconceivable. We had in Oaxaca 2 weeks ago one father that tried to rape her 2 years old children, daughter. That is really, I cannot really conceive that kind of situation. What kind of father can be this father trying to rape a 2 years old girl that is his daughter? Well, I can tell horrible stories, and you have also horrible stories about what the people are doing, because what we need to know, it is people damaged by the system, very damaged, destroyed as human beings, and then reacting with the people around them in a horrible way. And then you are having, and then Rachel's stories told us some reactions that we need to have before people close to us or not close to us that are committing horrible things and they have rage, they cannot handle the rage, or they handle the rage in the worst possible way, transform the rage into aggression and killing and doing horrible things, fighting with their loved ones, and etc., doing horrible things to the loved ones, all these kind of situations. And then Rachel gave us a series of elements of how to deal with this personal interaction of the people damaged, that we need to assume, we need to understand why they are doing what they are doing, but there are people really affected by the situation. And then in a sense, we can begin to have a kind of compassion for them. And then instead of reciprocating the rage, instead of fighting with them, what Rachel said, instead of bullying the bullies and transforming yourself into a bully, it is trying to discover an alternative path to deal with this specific situation, the interaction with the people damaged by the situation, and that having unable to transform rage into love. That is one specific class of situation. I would like to talk now about something else, that is the rage about the situation, and that is not exactly a rage about the big and the powerful. It's not rage against Bill Gates or this kind of people. It's a rage that can first, an abstract expression, is a rage against the system, the kind of society that we have created.
Rage against the machine.
Yes, rage against the machine, exactly. And then you really want to destroy the machine. You don't want any agreement. You don't want compassion. You don't want to care for the machine. You want really to destroy them. But to destroy them does not mean that you want to assassinate Bill Gates. Sometimes you want. There is a moment in which you rage against the machine is transformed. Oh God, these guys, when you hear what they are thinking, what they are doing, the kind of transformations, it's not transformation, the transmogrification of humans into something horrible, that they are the service of the machine, and they are trying to transform us into machines in what Illich called the subsystems of systems. And they are really planning and using technology to hurt every one of us and to transform us, to transmogrify us in something absolutely horrible. And they are doing that. They are really doing, they are implementing it. They are creating the technologies and using the technologies to produce that kind of beings. There is a moment in which you say, we need to kill them. You need to eliminate them from this kind of disease in the society. But of course, that is not the real rage we are talking about. Those are simple moments in which you have enough anger and you transform that anger in the desire of that kind of desire. You are not organizing how to assassinate Bill Gates. You are not transforming your rage in that kind of plot. I am talking about the rage against the machine. And of course, we have a magnificent example of how you can deal with this even with humor. The magnificent humor of Subcomandante Marcos. He has never surrendered. He has always expressed the rage against the system and how they have been doing to the indigenous people and to everyone. And he has clearly transformed rage, this rage against the machine, this rage against the whole system of capital and patriarchy and the so-called democracy and the state and the system, has been transforming it to a kind of militancy. But that militancy is not the abstract militancy of the left and class struggle. And then in the class struggle, in the tradition of the left, because you have a beautiful goal, the revolution, and seize power to organize the revolution and to create a magnificent society in your utopian dreams, then you are allowing yourself to do any kind of things. You commit all kinds of crimes. The left have been doing horrible things, absolutely horrible things, in the name of great ideals. Then
that reminds me of the quote by Nietzsche: those who fight monsters must beware that they do not become monsters themselves.
Absolutely.
And those who stare into the abyss also stares back at them.
Yes. And of course, we know that many people in the left, many good radicals, not criminals, becomes monsters, becomes horrible people. I am not talking only of Stalin. I am talking about many, many different kind of people in the left that in the name of the revolution even sacrifice their family and sacrifice personal relations and do horrible things in the name of the big ideal. That is not the case of Marcos and the Zapatistas. First of all, their rage is transformed into love for your own people. Then Marcos and the Zapatistas are, first of all, occupied in dealing how they transform the relations in their own place with their own people to resist the transformation. Perhaps I must say something about this. We have been an occupied country since the day we were born as Mexico. And then we have been occupied for a long time by the US. We are an occupied society. We have the world record of American military interventions. And the US, after waging war against us and invading us and using their weapons against us and occupying us in many different ways, the Americans discovered that the best way to occupy us was to occupy our souls, to occupy our minds, to transform us in followers of the American way of life and accept the domination as the best thing that can happen to us. Then to be voluntarily occupied by the enemy. Then it is something that has happened to us and has produced the usual reaction of the left. You have the guerrilla, you have they use the violence to resist this and to confront the occupation with weapons, with violence, with all the means that you have at your disposal. But that is not the tradition of the Zapatistas. The first reaction of the Zapatistas, they came from that traditions. They started, 6 professional revolutionaries arrived to Chiapas and tried to do that kind of things, to organize that kind of things. But they were able to listen and to learn with indigenous people and to start an alternative path. And that alternative path was, first of all, the transformation of that rage into love for your own people. And then the main task, the main activity of the Zapatistas have been how to transform their own reality. I could say, for example, just to give you one example, the day of the uprising, January 1st, 1994, they announced the new law of the Zapatistas, and with it, the revolutionary law of women. And the women themselves organized among the Zapatistas a law to struggle against patriarchy among the Zapatistas, not patriarchy in the abstract. It is the relations, to change the relations among them and to denounce and to present the machismo among the Zapatistas and how to transform that kind of relations within them into love. Love for a different kind of being, the communal being, the creation of a different kind of society in your own place. When they started after the negotiation with the government and the failure of the government, and when they organizing the international encounter that was called the intergalactic encounter, and they ended, instead of following the tradition of 5,000 of Trotskyists and Maoists and Marxists of every kind, trying to create again another international of the left, the Zapatistas announced the International of Hope. And I can clearly associate hope with love. It was a different proposal, and a different proposal that implied transforming Zapatismo in a source of hope, a source of inspiration, saying the Zapatistas all the time the opposite of what many other groups of the left have been saying. They were saying, please don't imitate us. We are not a model. We are not guiding you to any place. We want a world in which many words can be embraced. If you talk about many words that can be embraced, you are talking about love. How to transform your rage into love. How to transform in a very active, passionate militancy. They were saying, we are dead, we are ready to give our lives. We are struggling for life, but we are ready to give our own lives for the kind of love that we have for Mother Earth and for other people. Yes, they were militant, absolutely militant. They were doing a lot of things, but not imitating the traditional left or imitating the right and the government and the violence of the power elites. They were doing something else. I think that the Zapatistas is today the best example of how to transform rage into love. It's a passionate love. It's not abstract. It's not loving a cause, loving an ideal. It's not loving metaphysics. It is loving your people, loving real people, loving each other. That is in every event, in every encounter with the Zapatistas, you see those expressions of love, but all the time with rage, all the time. The Zapatistas are talking all the time. Yes, we are at war, and in this war, we want the destruction of the enemy. But the enemy is not this person. It's not Carlos Slim or Bill Gates. It's not to assassinate one person. It's not to commit violence against the violence you are. They are ready to defend themselves. They are exposed to all kinds of attacks. But they are all the time transforming that rage into love and finding ways to avoid more violence. and to stop the violence in a different way, trying to create conditions in which that violence cannot no longer be produced. And of course, I think that the best way to talk about this is how the Zapatistas have inspired, I dare to say, millions of people around the planet to do something else, to create a transformation at the grassroots, the transformations about the ways you live, about your attitudes, in which you are still fighting. Yes, you are struggling like mad, dedicating your life to a struggle, but not expressing the anger in your personal relationships. I will say that it is a different of Rachel's father. It's not the same. It's perhaps the similar kind of rage about what is bad, but not expressing this anger with the same kind of violence, but transforming the balance you are getting into something else. Even in the case of aggression, even in the case they are every day, Zapatista communities are exposed to physical violence, all kind of physical violence, by paramilitaries, the groups sent by the government, many different kind of things. And they are not reacting. They have the weapons. They can use the weapons and then fight against them. They can win in that specific battle, but they are not doing that. They are organizing different kind of responses.
It reminds me of the Salt March with Gandhi. I was thinking about how when he started out just with a few people on that march, and he said to them, no matter what happens, some of us will die, some of us will get struck down, but keep marching. Because the idea was at the end, when he got to the ocean and picked up the salt, he reclaimed it. And everyone reclaimed that salt. And I think that's what the Zapatistas do, and they're reclaiming their autonomy in food production, in learning, in medicine, and so on.
Yes, please, Rachel.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I think in the case of my father and in the case of, people who are feeling angry with the system, that anger is coming from a sense of helplessness and hopelessness, because it's so much bigger than them. Like, how can you fight against something so big? But there are ways, like you're saying, there are ways. It doesn't have to be head to head. It can be, there's ways to fight around it and to not feel that helplessness. And with the Gandhi thing, right, it's the same thing. If you're just not scared, if the fear is gone and the hopelessness is gone, and you find a way to have hope, and you find a way to work around the system, then that's the key to it. I'm gonna shut the window because it's, oh wait, they're going away. It's
It's because the garbage truck.
Yeah.
It'll be gone.
This is a very critical point that Rachel raised. I will say that this looks as a very abstract reflection, but it is not. We have been educated in the idea that abstractions are real, and that we create, that they are as real as real reality. And then we are fighting against the abstractions as if they were real, but they are not. And then if you are struggling against capital, or if you see the giant against you, and then you feel helpless. You cannot fight against that monster. You cannot fight really personally against Bill Gates. But reality is not like that. The important is that capital is in your place at a different level. And what you are doing is changing the relations that define capital and power in your own place. There is nothing more important to dismantle capitalism than to stop consuming. That is real, very strong force, very strong elements you have in your hands. And you're really dismantling the machine just by stopping your consumption. And then you are very powerful because it is within your power to stop consuming.
Well, the
Even if
prices are getting so high, we're going to be forced to stop consuming. So because we
No choice.
we can't afford anything.
yes, but at the same time, you
Mm.
can. Okay, we are having here this conversation. How can every week we can take a decision saying I will no longer consume this kind of thing that I am. I love it and I like it, or I am scheduled. I am shaped in that way, and I'm consuming it because of that habit. But we need to stop consuming. We need to stop doing that kind of things.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of hopelessness though. Like the other day I posted something and somebody responded with "there is no hope," and I think people are, so a lot of people are resigned to that there is no hope, especially with the fact that we're having climate, change related crises rather, and people are that's something I've noticed. A lot of people are saying, there is no hope. How do you counteract that?
Yes, first of all, I would immediately say, remember of that magnificent sentence of Ivan Illich at the end of the School Society, 1971, when he wrote, the survival of the human race depends on rediscovering hope as a social force. I am absolutely convinced that he was really right. This is our only hope, Brian, Rachel. We cannot have hope if we don't rediscover hope as a social force. And then we will have no planet, and we will see the worst possible scenario in the following years. The second point is what I said before about taking abstractions for real. It is very useful to talk about climate collapse as a general hypothesis about what is happening. But we don't need to believe that. We don't know what is happening with the climate. We have no idea. That's not the reality. That is not real. That whole hypothesis, that whole theory, abstractions are not, abstractions are something that can illuminate our reality, but they are not the reality. And then if you really believe that that is real, and then you are fighting against the climate collapse in the whole planet, you are, of course, without any hope. You feel that you are helpless, that you cannot really fight against that monster, and there is nothing to do. And you see the big and the powerful doing all kinds of things and continue the destruction, and you say there is nothing to do. We cannot have any hope, because we will have more and more destruction all the time. I cannot do anything. But if you recover your senses and you recover a sense of reality, and you know what reality is, and you see that first of all, you can change your own behavior, and you are changing the world by changing your own behavior about yourself and about what you are doing personally to Mother Earth. All important changes in the world, all the changes that stopped all kind of horrors, started with little people, small people, ordinary people, doing the right thing in the right moment. It is not the big and the powerful again. It's not the Winter Palace and the Bastille. It was really ordinary men and women that started to do something else, and then they produced the change.
It's my ripple theory. My theory about the ripples that go out from everything that you do and how many people it can touch, that you have no idea. It's the smallest things. And you just make one action and it affects the people right around you, which affects their people there. And it can go on for, you never know. You never know how far it could go.
We are talking about contagion and commotion instead of promotion. You're not leading the world in a certain direction, but you are doing your things. And then other people say, oh, that's interesting. I can do something like that. And then you inspire others to do the same. Yes, that is the ripple effect, yes. And that is, again, transforming rage into love.
Would anybody like to share a moment that they had, and like an example of transforming rage into love within your own life?
Yes,
I did
of course.
already.
Well, another one.
I had to think about it for a second, because I'm kind of new at it. Kind of. I mean, not that much, but I mean, I don't know. I think I have had several instances of learning to forgive, not for. It took a very long time for me to understand that forgiveness is about not carrying a burden yourself. It doesn't relieve it's not relieving someone else of it or excusing them. It's taking that burden off of your own shoulders that you carry when you can't stop being angry at someone. And it's an incredible amount of work to talk yourself into it. But again, I feel like it ripples out in these positive ways to not only the people around you that are watching and learning from your example, but also to the person you're forgiving, who isn't expecting it probably. And who knows, maybe it makes a difference with them, maybe it doesn't. But I've seen, I think about the things that have inspired me to do great things, that some of my work has been really far reaching, and I know that, but the people that inspired me to do that work, it was a small thing, something so small that they did that I thought was brave or vulnerable or loving, and that I wanted to emulate. So I did. And that goes on to everyone that I taught it to, and then to my children and whoever they will teach it to. And, I think that the smallest things can have such a big impact. And I try to remember that all the time, especially when I'm feeling, because I have my rage is pretty impressive.
It is. Gustavo, I've seen little glimpses of it come out, and it's pretty intense.
And I've worked really hard to control it, but really you can't control something as much as channel it. And so, I've tried to learn to channel it in a different, to use it to push me in a positive way, as opposed to, use it to overpower or to scare someone else into compliance or to staying away from me or whatever it is that I want them to do.
She's got an angry dragon inside her.
I do. And but that none of the times that I've used it to my advantage has it felt good. So, I've never felt good about scaring anyone or intimidating anyone or upsetting them. It does take a lot of getting walked on too, to learn how to control it. There's a balance that you have to find, and it takes a while. It takes a while from being a fighter to not being a fighter. But it's like you were saying about the Zapatistas, you're still a fighter. You're just not, you're not the force going towards them. It waits till it comes to you, and you fight for yourself and for your space. But it's a thin line, and it's hard not to cross. It takes a lot of self-control, a huge amount of self-control. And I think that that's a strength that people should work on their whole lives, is to learn to control their emotions, especially that one, and to channel it in ways that positive things come out of, because it doesn't hurt. It doesn't help you or anyone else to just go out and lash out, which is what I did for many years. I was a lasher. I'm gonna level this. I'm gonna just level everything, and then we'll see how's everybody like that. Okay, I'm just gonna blow it all, and then we'll see. We could start over. How about that?
I think one of your favorite phrases, I'm gonna burn this down, whatever it is.
Not the bridge, the whole city. I'll just burn to the ground and go. Yeah, because I was very willing to destroy what I had too, to make my point. Very willing to sacrifice and just burn it all down, whether I valued it or not, just to show how serious I was. That's just, and then we're sitting there in the rubble, and I'm very serious, and we're sitting in rubble. But everyone knows I'm serious now, so that's took care of that. So, you got to take yourself a little less seriously, I guess. But it's a defense mechanism, and it keeps people away. And that's not what we want. We don't want to keep people away. We want to bring them in.
Gustavo, you were going to say something?
Yes, we are coming to the end of our conversation today. And my story is a very long story.
We have 10 minutes.
Yeah, but I think that that is not enough for my
Okay.
story. But I think that it can open a different kind of conversation that is not only about transformation of rage into love. It is opening something that we need to discuss now more than ever. That is racism and the expressions of patriarchy that has a racist shape. Because Mr. Trump and the pandemic opened the door for an open racism that is now entirely evident. Of course, many people suffered around the world racism in their bones, in their skin every day. And they knew, for example, the black people in the US knew very well how racist the American society was. But it was not recognized. I had for many years very progressive people, very open, very gentle, very compassionate people saying, "Oh no, no, in America is not like that. Of course, we have the Ku Klux Klan, but it is only some people out there. We are not racist. Of course, we are not racist. We are a good society. We are open, hospitable to everyone." You know that this happened. It is happening today with the people denying the fundamental racism that constructed the American society. But now it is open, and it is everywhere. You cannot deny the racism in American society today because it is so open, so evident, and so terrible. And then I would like to talk a story in which I was raised. I was raised in a family that was dramatically racist in my home against my mother and against my grandmother. Like my grandmother could not enter my house in Mexico City through the front door because she was an Indian, she was a Zapatista. And the main question that I would like to discuss more is how I accepted that as a normal condition and how the racism that I interjected, the fundamental racism in my being, was assumed as a good thing because we are all humans. There is no difference among the humans. We must not classify the Indians as a different kind of people. They are just poor and they are ignorant. Then what we need to do is to bring development to them, to bring education to them. But we can treat them as ignorant people that are clearly inferior to us. That was that internalization of racism. And when I discovered many years later what my father has done to us, that specific rage of the discovery, seeing for the first time many years after he was dead, what he really has done to his children, to his wife, to all of us. And I can see today, when I am 85 years old, I can see him with certain compassion of how lonely he was, how horrible life he spent the last 20 years of his life is a real horror. But in the time, it was not like that. Then that is an opening to a different kind of conversation that perhaps we can have at another time, Brian, and to discuss in a different context this question, because it is a kind of rage that you did not express in the right moment. I could not express any rage against my father when he was alive. I was absolutely subordinated to him as the right thing to do and accepting that as the right thing to do and even enjoying that kind of subordination. And this patriarchal condition was absolutely the normal kind of things in my house and accepted by me without any rage. I was not, my older brother expressed rage sometimes and he paid the consequences. But I was never feeling that kind of rage against my father. But then 20 years later, when I discover what he has done to me, to all his family, it was a later discovery. An immense rage accumulated in me, and was very destructive. I cannot express any longer this rage against my father because he was already 20 minutes before death. He died many years before. This is the kind of things in which I will try to, perhaps we can have a different conversation. And what is the meaning, the real meaning of racism in the modern society? And which are the implications for the kind of situation that we are confronting today in the US? What we have in Mexico is the same kind of racism, or even worse, but not recognized or confessed. People don't feel they are racist here. In the case of the US, you have the expression of white supremacy is something different. It is good to be white. It's accepted to be white and to protect that, the rights of that minority. Here, you don't have anything like that, but you have a very similar kind of racism. Then this is the very complex things that I want to tell my own long story, and then we can start different kind of conversations perhaps in the next year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for this conversation on transforming rage into love. So this will be the last conversation of 2021, and we will resume again, hopefully in 2022. Thank you so much, Gustavo Esteva, and my wife and co-host Rachel Snyder. This was The Blind Men in Black. Thank you for watching on YouTube and listening on Apple Podcast. And if you like the show, please rate, subscribe, and review. Also, check out my wife and I on the Exhausting Snyders on TikTok. All right. Well, happy holidays and happy New Year. Now we're going to have our awkward ending. Here we go.
Aha, awkward ending.
Here we go.